So Nokia were kind enough to send me a Lumia 1520 because they wanted to get my opinion of it. I'm only supposed to have it for 2 weeks and I'm supposed to give it a review, let them know what I think of it, that kind of stuff, and kind of go from there. So I thought I'd do a bit of first impressions of it as opposed to a proper review. I'll do a proper review when they ask me to hand it back, and I'll film it on the day that, because obviously I've only really had this for a week and a half now, maybe. It might actually be even been 2 weeks. And I've been using it as not my primary device, but I'll explain in a minute why I can't use it as a primary device. But I'll go through kind of my opinions of it and first impressions and stuff like that. First things first, it's running Windows Phone. Now, that is both good and bad. I have to say, the phone's great. I think the phone on its own is a fantastic phone. It's brilliant, it's fantastic, it's great. But the trouble is, it's running Windows Phone. Now, Windows Phone is fine. Windows Phone is probably the best mobile operating system you can possibly go out and use. It's fantastic, it works great, it's really stable, etc, etc. But the App Store is absolute crap. It really is. It's really, really rubbish. There's just no apps for it. Now, I had a bit of, I don't know, backwards and forwards with a few, like, militant Windows Phone fanboys. Look, I love Windows Phone, I think it's great. Trouble with Windows Phone is, although there are some apps, and there are a lot more apps than there used to be, there's still big gaps in terms of the apps that actually exist for Windows Phone. So, for instance, there's no official YouTube app. Now, that's Google's fault, because they don't want Microsoft to have a copy of YouTube on there. And there's MetroTube, but I don't really want to have to use a third-party app to get things to work. It's similar to things like Dropbox. There's no official Dropbox app, so you've got to use Cloud 6, which, again, is fine, but it doesn't do some of the kind of stuff that you want it to do. It does support automatic uploads and kind of the same sort of stuff that Dropbox does, so you've still got the same sort of usability there, but I shouldn't have to be going to third-party apps to get things to work. Things like the Instagram app is still in beta. Now, that works alright, but it's still a little bit clunky, it doesn't work as well. Same with the Twitter app. The Twitter app on Windows Phone, it does let you send pictures a lot easier than on Android, because Android, for some bizarre reason, falls on its arse half the time when it wants to send pictures. I think it gets stuck trying to compress it and it can't quite do anything with it. So there is that going for it in terms of the official Twitter app, but the official Twitter app, I don't know, there's just some really like clunky things it does. It doesn't always notify you when things happen. It doesn't always refresh the timeline, and so you get lots of problems with that. There's also no decent Twitter client for Windows Phone at all. There's Me Tweets and there's a few other ones, but to be honest, they're all crap. They really are rubbish, which is a real shame because, again, Windows Phone's great. I tried to use this as my primary device. I really did. I really tried. I thought, yeah, I'm going to use it as my primary device, but I couldn't. And the reason I couldn't is because of Twitter. Twitter is, I'm not ashamed to admit, I'm probably quite addicted to Twitter, and when I'm going to work every day, I like to catch up on what's happening on Twitter and things like that. That's kind of what I do of the morning. And I can do it on Plume, no problem at all. On Android, no problem. On Carbon, no problem. On Falcon, again, no problem. There's a few times when it craps out, but generally, really great experience. On this, such a pain in the backside. Like, I really want somebody to create a decent Twitter app, for Christ's sake. Even Microsoft, get your arse in gear, create a decent Twitter app that allows you to look at your previous tweets and stuff like that. I want something that embeds some third-party stuff in there, like Get Pocket and all other kind of stuff. The other problem as well that I found is that there is nothing like Read It Later, or, well, not Read It Later, but what Pocket is now, because I use Pocket all the time for loads of stuff under Android. And for some weird reason, you can't actually, well, not only is there not an official app for it, but also you can't share things between apps as easily. So with Android and with now iOS, you can share between apps quite easily. So you can share with Twitter and Facebook and all these other kind of apps that you've got installed. On here, however, it's not so easy. There are obviously some of the standard ones you usually get, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram to a lesser extent, but some of the app sharing isn't kind of quite there either, which is, again, annoying. And the camera isn't really that great. I mean, it's a 20 megapixel camera. Fine, you know, great. But the trouble is with it, it just, like, you can use several versions of the camera. So there's an official Windows Phone version, and there's like a Nokia Lumia kind of version, which is better. But the camera's kind of like, it's just meh, really. It's just like, it's got a 20 megapixel sensor, great, yeah, fantastic, you'd think that would be really good, but it's just not. It just, I don't know what it does, it just sort of ruins pictures. I mean, I'll show you obviously some pictures that you can see now, and you kind of get your thoughts on it. But comparing it to something like a DSLR, right, now that's got 16 megapixels, obviously with dedicated lens, and then compare it to my Xperia Z, really it's not that much better than any of them, really. I wouldn't say that it's, you know, it's a really great camera, you should go and get it. It's kind of like one of those things that, like, Nokia have just kind of bundled it with a device, and it's kind of just like, meh, I don't know. I mean, it does a good enough job. It does a good enough job, it's there. But considering how much it sticks out, and considering quite how big it is, and considering, you know, they hype it up so much, you kind of expect it to be a bit better. One of the great things, though, I really do love, is I do like the button layout on the side. So with the button layout on the side, it means that you can select the camera wherever you are. Now this is really great, because you can just press the camera button and it goes straight to the camera. There's a little bit of delay in terms of the actual camera showing up, but it means you can use not only that as well, but it also means it's a hardware button for using the camera, so you don't actually have to use the touchscreen, which is really handy. I like that, because I always hate having, you know, when you square out the picture, you've then got to press the shutter button on the screen as opposed to the top of the device. So I quite like that. That's the only thing I'd say, yeah, great. The other trouble as well is with the camera is the flash. The flash is way too bright, way too powerful, and it it sort of just fills the image with light, and it doesn't, and because it's so refined and narrow, I mean, some of the pictures I've captured for Twitter and stuff, I've just had to not use the flash because it doesn't work very well. And in low light, that's really kind of annoying. So it means that stuff like in the foreground is really, really bright, and the rest of the picture is kind of really dark. And I don't know, that kind of thing sort of annoys me. So the camera's kind of meh. I mean, in terms of camera spec, it looks quite impressive on paper. I mean, the primary image sensor is obviously 20 megapixels with some pure view thing that Nokia calls it. It's got Carl Zeiss optics, so it should be pretty good. It's got roughly a half-inch sensor, so the sensor's quite big as well. It's got an f2.1 aperture, focal length of 26mm. The minimum focus range 10 centimeters, so obviously macro shots aren't too bad. And obviously it's got dual LED flash, which possibly could be why it's just flooding the foreground with light, and the rest of it's just kind of washed out. I don't know. Plus the fact that it's kind of quite, where the flash is quite close to the actual camera itself, I don't know. In terms of video, I actually am quite impressed with the video on it. This is actually the device itself, as you can kind of guess. And the video is not bad. The video is 1020p. It's you can do it in 30 frames, 25 frames, 24 frames, and then obviously things are below that as well, including 720p. Now that's quite cool. And this is the front-facing one, so it's kind of, they're not bad. You know, the cameras are really great for video, absolutely fantastic. Similar to the EOS M, the video, you know, for it is great, but images not so much. I wouldn't say it's really necessarily the greatest photo camera ever really on a mobile device. So yeah, the camera's not great. The specs are damn impressive though. It's got a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800, it's a quad-core 2.2 GHz, which is pretty good. Decent battery size as well, which is 3400 mAh, which is pretty damn good. Internal storage 32 gigabytes, 2 gigs of RAM, and obviously micro SD card support as well, so up to 64 gigabytes of external space, and 7 gigabytes worth of free cloud storage, which is quite cool, so that could be via OneDrive and stuff. So for first impressions, I'm not overly impressed. I would say that actually this is a great work device. So I would say that if my place of work was looking for phones to give out to employees, I would recommend anything that Lumia makes, because seriously, it's great for that. Email's fantastic, office support is great, most of the stuff I need to use for work is absolutely fantastic, with the exception of things like pen testing and Wi-Fi support, that kind of stuff. But the email app on this is absolutely great. I have to say this is probably the best mobile app I think I've ever used on a mobile device. It's really fantastic. Obviously it's got full range of support for everything. It's better than the mail support within iOS. It's better than Mail for Mac OS. It's better than Outlook for Windows. Well, I say it's better. It's kind of better in a different way. It's just simpler and easier to use, and it kind of just works. The only thing I don't like about it is obviously somewhere along the line, Google and Microsoft are kind of falling out, and they don't want to do proper Gmail support. So as opposed to it syncing as things come through, it syncs every 5 minutes. Whether or not that's a difference between them using IMAP and POP, I don't know, but yeah, it's a little bit weird. Obviously, Exchange support's fully really great, and again, things like Outlook.com and Hotmail are really fantastic as well. I don't actually generally use it too much for things like that, because I use Google Mail, Gmail for most things because their spam filtering is great. I would use Outlook.com and stuff like that if I'd invested in that sort of thing a while ago, which I did when I first got my first email, but now I've moved over to Gmail and that's now my primary email service. So Internet Explorer's alright. The other thing I don't like about it is if you find an Instagram or YouTube link or something like that, as opposed to it opening in the app that it should do, it opens it in Internet Explorer, and then you have to use Internet Explorer for the things. So things like Instagram doesn't link to the Instagram app like it does in Android, which is kind of annoying. I think similarly with things like Spotify as well, it doesn't actually pick up that Spotify is installed and actually launch it, which is annoying. Office app is absolutely fantastic. I really love things like that. Spotify app's great. They're just, the thing is, apps exist for it. It works fine, but it doesn't work as good as Android. It doesn't work as good as iOS. So for first impressions, I love the device. I really do. I think it's a great device. If you removed Microsoft stuff and you just released it as an Android device, great. It will be fantastic. It will be a great phone. But because it's running Windows Phone, which is, Windows Phone's great, but because it's got that rubbish app store, and because companies won't invest in the infrastructure or in the platform, it means that it's losing out big time. And the trouble with that is, it's kind of like a never-ending circle, because people won't go Windows Phone because there's not very many apps for it. So because of that, because nobody's going for the phone, that means that nobody's developing apps for it, so it means people aren't going for the phone. So it's kind of like a perpetual machine of nobody's doing anything with it. It's the same with app development. Like, some of the apps exist there, but they're still a bit shit, you know? Obviously they develop for Android and iOS first, because that's what most people use. I think that's kind of why Windows Phone only has a 5% market share, which is really kind of bad, because it's like, it's a really good operating system. It really is. It's probably, I would say, I would stand by this till the day I die. Well, until obviously Microsoft ruin it, but I think Windows Phone is the best mobile operating system you could possibly use, apart from the App Store, because I mean, the trouble is with the App Store as well is not only there's some lacking in terms of official support, there's also when you type in things like YouTube, it comes up with about, I don't know, 5 different miscellaneous apps that obviously aren't the official YouTube app, but are trying to be, and it's kind of stuff like that you kind of gets annoying. It's like, Microsoft, just sort your shit out and ban those kinds of apps, you know. But so the App Store needs a lot of work, both on the part of Microsoft and both on the part of likes of Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, things like that, you know, Facebook, to get the apps actually up to scratch on Windows Phone. The last thing to end on is the screen size is stupidly large. It's far too big. It's 6 inches, which is just it's just too big for a phone. They're going to go into that whole horrible what's too big, how to use it kind of debate again, aren't we? But the screen size is just too big. Although it's thin enough for you to get away with the screen size, you can't really use it every day with your thumb, because it just kind of, you can't reach all the bits you want to reach, and so it's really poor for that. Most of the apps don't take advantage of the screen real estate. All it does is it makes everything bigger. So like things like Twitter, as opposed to making the resolution of the fonts, so the font size will be the same, and then just obviously having them slightly smaller so that, you know, it's using the same amount of pixels. It doesn't, it just makes everything bigger, so you don't actually get any benefit from that. So it kind of seems pointless having a big screen, really. I have to say that the big screen does make a difference for taking photos and for taking video and for web browsing. I think it's really good for, and for things like Instagram, when the Instagram app works properly. I think it's kind of a bit of a shame, really, because I think it's a great device. I think it's a bit of a shame that it's not that it's running Windows Phone, but the app support isn't there. What I'd really love to see Microsoft do is release an Android version of their Lumia devices. I really would. Now that would both be good and bad for Microsoft, because what that would say is that, oh well, we don't really, we know that Windows Phone's flopping, and that sort of says to investors, oh that's bad, you know, Windows Phone's crap, and it says to customers, oh Windows Phone's crap. So the thing is, what they should really be doing, and what they should really be looking at, is not necessarily scrapping Windows Phone, but having Windows Phone as a layer on top of Android, because Android's got it nailed down. Android really has. Well, not necessarily in terms of user experience and in terms of usability, because iOS has got that nailed down. But the thing is, like, Windows Phone has got usability and all that kind of stuff nailed down. The downside is some of the background stuff just doesn't work as well. In-app sharing doesn't work as well. It just doesn't work as well. Although it's great, there's just some things that are kind of lacking, which is kind of a bit of a shame. Should you go out and buy it? Definitely not. RRP on this is 650 quid, but you can get it on Amazon for about 430 quid. So I still wouldn't spend that kind of money on a Windows Phone, and I don't care what the specs are like. It's just not worth it, because it can't take advantage of that kind of power. I mean, yeah, if you're using it for games, then great, you know, it's great for that. But in terms of day-to-day use, in terms of Twitter, there's no real point. I mean, with Android, I can quite easily see why you need all that stuff, because Android runs better, it renders pages better, it means you can do a lot more things at once, whereas like Windows Phone isn't geared up for that, it's more closed. So what I mean closed in terms of like the apps, so the apps are closed off between each other, so you can't like run multiple things at once, and I don't think there's any point it being that high spec, and for 430 quid, really isn't worth the money for just for the lack of apps. You know, if I was going to go out and buy a phone, I would just go and get something else. I'd buy, if I was like now, I'd go and buy the Z3. I wouldn't worry about the iPhone 6 because that's crap, but you know, I wouldn't bother with the Windows Phone at any size, any price. Well, unless I bought one of their really cheap ones as a backup phone. Like, I'd quite happily spend like 100, 200 quid on one of their really, really cheap phones, and actually I think that's where Nokia should really be concentrating on, is their cheap market, because I think a lot of people will go for that, and I think a lot of people are. If you look at the sort of like the low-end Nokias, there's quite a lot of people buying low-end Nokias because they're cheap. Because the low-end Android smartphones are crap, and they're just, you know, they're too underpowered, and because Android requires quite a bit of power to run properly, you kind of don't get the same experience, whereas Windows Phone uses so little resource. It's great. Battery life is also damn good. I've actually run this all day, on 3G, on 4G, on everything like that, and it's lasted an entire day. And I just have to, and actually with some more space on it as well, and then obviously charging at the end of the day, as opposed to my Sony Xperia Z, which I have to charge all the time, like every half a day I've got to charge it. Basically, when I'm at work, I've got to charge it in the morning as soon as I get into work, at lunchtime, and then obviously I'll have to charge it from lunchtime all the way to the end of the day, get on the bus, come home, have tea, then charge it again. So I probably have to charge my phone 4 times a day. This one, I don't have to charge ever, which is great. So battery life's really great, and I think that's in part due to Windows Phone being fantastic on resources, and also the fact that it's got a 3400 mAh battery. I will do a proper review of this at some point, doing like all sorts of manner of things. Depends how long I get to keep the device for. I'm hoping quite a while. I'm hoping I get to take it to EGX with me, which would be fantastic, because I will do it. I'll use it as my primary device. I'll go around, take video, I'll use it for all sorts of stuff, and we'll do a proper Lumia thing, and I'll ask some people what they think of it, and we'll kind of go from there. So this is pretty much all I've got to say on it. It's been a bit long, but I wanted to give you my opinions of it, and yeah, I'll try and do a proper review, say, later on. Obviously, hit me up on Twitter at AzzyChill, send me an email, aaron@azzychill.com, and apart from that, I shall catch you in a later video. It's not too... Way.